Well, welcome to another chat with Tim. Last time we started talking about why people from complex trauma escape into fantasy so much. And what we tried to see is that the first response to danger that a child goes through is fight or flight. So they go out of their ventral vagal state into their sympathetic vagal state. But for most children, fight or flight isn't an option. But while they're in fight or flight, they will develop a whole bunch of fantasies. Revenge fantasies. I'm going to be Superman and I'm going to beat up all the bad guys. I'm going to be a star and get all my needs met. So they develop all kinds of things to try to compensate for the needs that aren't being met and to escape the danger that they feel themselves in. But then children can go, if fight or flight's not working, they then go to freeze, to dissociation. And now the fantasies change to very much escape. But before we look at that, and this is what we've been really wanting people to see, is that fantasies are really a symptom of a deeper issue. They show that something's going on in your nervous system. Your nervous system is responding to its sense of danger, to a threat. And it is seeing that fantasizing is the only way or the best way to escape the pain of the present. And so if that's the case for a child, and that becomes their common way of escaping, what can happen then in adult life is that they find they slip back into it very easily without even realizing it, and they don't even realize how often they are trying to escape the present by going to this fantasy world. And that can be through online busyness, movies, books. That can be through just escaping into this world of thinking where everything is wonderful and perfect and the way they want it to be. So what I want to look at today is the other two vagal states. So the ventral vagal state and the dorsal vagal state. What do fantasies look like there? So let's begin with the ventral vagal state. So that is our healthy state, when we are safe, when we are connected. That is when fantasy can actually be a very healthy thing. And it's really important to understand that. So in this ventral vagal state where I am experiencing all my emotions, I'm creative, I am being able to use all my brain, explore, be fully human, this is where I can use lots of imagination, lots of imagining what my life could be. There's a flexibility. If I tried this, what about this? If I had this job, if I was in this position. So it's got an element of fantasy, imagination, visioning, creative planning. All of that becomes part of being in your ventral vagal state. So you imagine growth, you imagine purpose, you imagine different relationships and connections that are available. And really what you're doing is this could actually happen. You're realistic. You're looking at the facts. You're looking at broad pictures from different angles and going, wow, that could happen. So you can envision a meaningful future with job, relationship, all based on facts, all based on the fact that you're healing and changing and learning tools and growing. And so in the ventral vagal state, what I want you to understand is this kind of healthy fantasy is supporting real life, not replacing it. It's enhancing real life. It's helping you think through what a healthy life would look like. It is not trying to escape life. It is fully present, exploring every nook and cranny of possibility. That's ventral vagal state. So what I would say to people from complex trauma is be very aware that if escaping into fantasy as a way to escape life has been part of your past, and it's been a common part of your coping survival tools, it's very easy today to go to healthy, fantasizing, envisioning what life could look like, looking at all kinds of different options, and then without realizing it, sliding into unhealthy fantasizing, wanting to just go there and stay there, wanting to just begin to embellish and focus on. And so what's beginning to happen, and this is what you need to watch out for, is you now would rather go and envision your future rather than deal with the problems of the present. And so as soon as you're starting to avoid problems, escape problems, and you're saying, oh, it's because I'm envisioning healthy imagination fantasy stuff, be very careful. You may slide into actually unhealthy escapes from dealing with the present. So let's go to the dorsal vagal state. So this is getting to kind of fight, flight hasn't worked. So we got to go now to shutting down, to freezing. And it's basically escaping. I feel helpless. I feel hopeless. There's just so much pain and emptiness. I can't deal with it anymore. And so it's the sympathetic vagal state fantasies were all about you taking action, you doing stuff. In the dorsal vagal state, the fantasies begin to be less about taking action, more about just leaving reality altogether, getting out of now. So the fantasies can feel foggy, distant, almost totally disconnected from anything that's resembles life, your reality. And so this is where a person can go just into an elaborate internal world for long periods of time where they're not necessarily doing action. They're just reviewing facts. They're just reviewing all kinds of old memories and all kinds of negative things. And they're going through kind of all the cities of the world. They're doing all kinds of math problems in their head. They're not taking action. They are just keeping their brain occupied with something that keeps it out or keeps it active. Or they could go to just numbing out. It's not like they're thinking about anything. They're just turning their brain off. And so their fantasy doesn't even have a whole lot of life or picture to it. It's just empty. It's just numb. It's just dissociation. They're in la la land. They're catatonic. They're not even able to focus their thoughts, but they're somewhere. They are out of there. And that is where some people can just totally leave their body, totally shut everything out, block a memory. It's all escaping this overwhelming pain that they feel helpless to resolve. So it's a way to not feel at all rather than have to process any of what's going on in their life. So this to me comes out of what I hope you see is childhood traumas that's on the extreme level of the trauma scale, where it's just too much to process, where there's nobody to be a co-regulator for them. So they're physically overwhelmed, they are emotionally overwhelmed with tremendous amounts of pain. And so they have only one option. They're too little to fight or flight. They have to retreat and develop a rich internal world where they can survive. And that could be they don't think at all, they don't feel at all, or it could be that there's an element where it's just a bliss. It's a very comfortable place for them. And so some people can develop, they can go through the motions in their present life, but have this parallel, rich internal life that actually gives them a sense of life, gives them a sense of feeling. In this going through the motions in their actual life, they feel dead. They feel like a robot. It's their rich internal world that enables them to feel somewhat alive and that life is worth living. And so you can see that the real world is a whole lot less attractive than the internal world. So they feel strong pulls to go to that internal world for long periods of time because it's much safer, much more satisfying to them. So reality is way too much. The internal world is a whole lot better. So let's go there and stay there. And so some of the themes that you can see on these dorsal vagal fantasies are total escape. In some cases, they become someone else entirely. They develop a parallel life of another person. Some go to fantasies of non-existence, of just disappearing, of being absent, of floating above, of fading, of vanishing. That's common. Or of watching their life as if it's happening to somebody else. So again, what you're seeing here is more extreme forms of dissociation as being necessary to survive. And there's the fantasy of disappearing that goes with that. So people, when they go there, they can lose sense of time. They can just be totally numb, and it can be very hard for them to want to go back to real life, to exit it, because real life just feels too dull and unreal after what they've just experienced. So having said that, let me just come to two things. Number one, people sometimes say, well, what's the harm in fantasizing? I don't think it harms me at all. So let me just get you to think about that. There's a quote by Denzel Washington that goes, "Beware of destination addiction." The idea that happiness is in the next place, the next job, or even with the next partner. Until you give up the idea that happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you are. And so another way to say that is if you're looking for your fantasies to provide the happiness that your present isn't, you're not going to ever be happy in the present because you're not resolving and dealing with the issues of the present. So some of the problems that can develop, and like I said, people begin to just slide into it more and more often. It becomes their preferred place, and so they deal with reality less and less, which then creates procrastinating and problems that snowball because they don't deal with. Secondly, fantasies usually include a series of lies. So your vagal state is creating a story that suits that vagal state. And there's distortions in that. So let me give you an example. You might, as a little child, just think if I had a puppy, I would be happy. Or if I had a girlfriend, then I would be happy. And you develop a fantasy around that. You haven't weighed out the cost of maintaining a puppy, the challenges and problems of an intimate relationship. And so you just go into that thinking it's going to magically fix you. And so that's where people begin to see fantasies as magical solutions, where you don't have to learn tools, you don't have to deal with problems. Everything is just magically perfect. The next thing that can happen when you develop fantasies and keep going to fantasies is that it's like you wear rose-colored glasses. So when you're in fantasy mode and you see somebody that seems to fit your fantasy, they could be a narcissist. They could be a terribly unhealthy person, but you think they're perfect. You can't see them accurately. You see them through rose-colored glasses, and you think they're going to fulfill your fantasy and fix everything when actually they could make life a whole lot worse. Then the next thing that happens is if somebody in your life who loves you sees that you're wearing rose-colored glasses, that you're in fantasy, that you're looking for a magical solution, and they challenge the lies, they challenge what you're believing, then you get mad at the very people who are trying to help you, who are exposing the lies of your fantasy. Sadly, what I've seen from many people who have chased fantasies, so that let's say they have addiction, they've been in abusive relationships, or a relationship with a narcissist, and they have the fantasy that there's a magic solution, everything's going to get fixed magically. They chase that fantasy for years and years and years, and 10, 20 years later, they're in the exact same spot as they were 20 years ago. In chasing the fantasy, they didn't do any of the hard work that would have resolved the problem, that would have given them the tools to get healthy. They kept thinking the fantasy would fix everything. So hanging on to fantasies, unhealthy fantasies, as a solution to the present is actually a form of self-destruction. It brings a series of negative consequences. That's what I hope you see. I find it interesting that studies have shown that people that escape through fantasies as a common feature often struggle with depression. I also find it interesting that they're attracted to narcissists because they think the narcissist who love bombs is going to fix everything. They fulfill the fantasy. Then they get hurt even worse. So another way to see it is that escaping through fantasy, it takes me out of my limbic brain pain to a limbic brain state where there's some pleasure. It's an instant gratification, but I don't have to deal with anything. I don't have to think long term to make sure it's a healthy solution. And so the desire for that instant gratification fix gradually creates more and more pain. So what do we do to change this? If you see this as part of your life, again, please don't see it as a failure, as a weakness. This was just your nervous system adapting earlier in life to trying to help you survive. It was creative when you were in danger to try and keep you safe. So the issue isn't that fantasies exist today. The issue is if fantasy becomes the primary place where you get your needs met. And so what you have to be able to see is if I've got some fantasies today, it's trying to compensate and get needs met. So let's stop and go, why am I doing this? Not to beat myself up, but to go, what problem is my nervous system trying to solve? What need is not being met? So if I'm having a revenge fantasy, it could be boundary violation, unprocessed anger, some injustice done. Or if I got a fame fantasy, it could be my shame was triggered. I haven't felt seen or heard or understood. Or a rescue fantasy where somebody comes and rescues me, then it's maybe I'm not feeling safe or I'm not feeling cared for. Or escape fantasy, then I must be feeling overwhelmed. Part of me is wanting to shut down. So if I slip into fantasy, look at that as, okay, what's this telling me about what's going on below the surface? Now, once I see that, okay, I got some needs here not being met. What do I need to do in the here and now to meet those needs in a healthy way? And then as you learn to do that, your brain goes, okay, we don't need to keep escaping to fantasy to survive because we can do it in the present in a healthy way. I hope that helps you. I hope that if you see that this escaping to fantasy is an issue for you, that you will get help, that you will talk to people, a therapist who really understands this stuff. Again, if this was helpful, please like, subscribe, share it, make a comment. We really appreciate it. Thank you.